Welcome to the overview video for the 3 new RYO logic modules. Between them you've got NAND, AND, OR, XOR, NOT, XNOR and NOR gate types, covering a mass of logic gates. There's LEDs on each panel so you can easily see the input signals and the output signals. They work right up through audio rates with some really nice discrete transistor clipping. So I'll start by showing how easily you can build up some beats. Whether you know what these logic gates are actually doing or not, it can still be really instantly fun. And then I'll look at each module and then go right up to audio rate as well. Taking a times 1 clock into the XNOR and NOT gate, my times 2 clock into the AND or NAND gate, my times 4 is going into the OR and NOR, and the times 8 can go into the bottom of the AND and NAND gate. Taking my kick drum trigger, and then here's taking the snare from the XNOR. I'll take a percussion sound and let's look through some of the generated rhythms. Here's the NAND. We can easily get that on the offbeat. Let's go to this trigger from the offbeat again and then add my hi-hats. Taking a copy of these out into another logic gate, we can create other rhythms. Here's another percussion sound. Let's mult a clock source into another logic gate. So you can see with just the times 1, times 2, times 4 and times 8 clock, it's really easy to start building up some rhythms and beats with just a few basic percussion sounds. Adding some clocks to the 2 RYO VC sequencers at the sides of the logic modules, I can add some variation to the percussion sounds. So let's vary up the rhythms and which modules trigger which sounds. So again, it's really easy to generate rhythms and trigger sounds around the modular. Looking at the NOR or OR gate, here's my times 8 clock going into the first input, and I've got my hi-hat trigger cable going into the OR. Taking my snare sound into the NOR and then slowing down the clock, you can hear the NOR is high when the input isn't high and the OR is high when the input is high. Plugging in a times 2 of my clock and then mixing with the times 8, we get new rhythms. Here's taking the snare out. And you can hear the rhythm on the hi-hat and each clock pulse, as it's a 50-50 pulse wave as shown on screen. I'll change this to a ×4 clock. And a ×1 clock. And we're still getting that snare perfectly in between. Taking my bass drum trigger and using the second OR or NOR for that sound. The output of the OR is normal to the first input of this gate. Leaving the normalizing on the first channel, here's adding the ×2 clock to that. So the NOR is high when the inputs aren't high, and the OR gate is high when either of the inputs are high. Moving on to the second module, here's the AND and NAND gate. Taking my ×1 clock in, as these are normaled with just one input, we can have this trigger my percussion sound. An AND gate only works when both signals are high, and breaking that normalizing with a cable, you can see that nothing passes through. Here's using the ×1 clock, and let's take a ×4 clock. You can hear when the ×1, which is the first two beats of the ×4, are high, the signal then passes through. Here's adding a ×8 to this instead of a ×4. And then taking the first cable out. And these are really just simple steady clocks that I'm using. Taking a second percussion sound into the NAND, which triggers when anything but two input triggers together, i.e. not an AND gate. I have the ×1 clock and a ×8 clock. The output of the AND gate is normal to the second gate below. The third and final logic module I'll look at is the XNOR, XOR and NOT module. Looking at the NOT signal first, I'll take a ×1 clock in, and the NOT gives the completely opposite of the input. So taking my kick drum from the NOT output, and then taking a stackable into the ×1 clock that's going into this, you'll hear that the snare will trigger perfectly in between that kick. Taking this out and into the first channel of the XNOR and XOR gate. An XOR is an exclusive OR which matches the English language version of the word OR, as in one or the other. A standard OR logic gate is one or the other or both. So that was a ×1 clock, and here I'll take a ×2 clock into the second channel. So as I've said, these overlapping clocks is what's creating the rhythms. I'll take a faster clock, let's say a ×8. And a ×2. Taking that into the second XOR. And adding a ×4 clock. Let's patch a slower clock in the ×2 and the ×4. Taking the snare drum trigger, you can hear the two different rhythms from the XNOR gates and the XOR, which are the opposite gate types to each other. Taking this into the second gate with a ×1 clock to mix with the normalizing. Taking the snare into the NOT output, this is a normal to the second logic gate's output. With some cross-patching and using the multiple logic gates per module, you can generate some really interesting rhythms very easily. Looking at audio rate signals into the gates, here's a triangle wave. So the signal path is currently a triangle wave going into the second channel of an RYO rhythmic, and I'm taking the signal output from the mix output so I can use the offset generated by the module as well as attenuating the triangle wave. The output cable is then going into the OR and NOR gate. Turning up the triangle wave, you can hear this thick square style wave. Each gate output has a slightly different sound, so here's the NOR output instead of the OR. I'll stick with that and turn down the attenuation and then add an offset and we get PWM style sounds. So you can hear the pulse width modulation type sound. It's a bit richer out of the OR gate with more high frequency content. I'll now patch an LFO into channel 1 on the rhythmic. All the other modules react in a similar way, with some having a softer sound than others, and we get this nice rich audio signals coming back through that discrete transistor clipping. Sticking with audio rate signals, I'll use the logic gates as a mixer. Here's the same triangle wave from before going in, and this is the OR gate. The XOR's got a slightly softer sound. I'll add a second triangle wave. It's really easy to just use this like a mixer, and I can tune in my second VCO. Here's a third triangle wave. Another option is, instead of using a third audio rate wave, you could use an LFO. This then almost becomes a VCA, as the triangle wave LFO opens the gate when it reaches the threshold set by the module, which dictates a high input affecting that logic gate state. Taking out that LFO, I'll stick with the third triangle wave and use this as a tuned chord. There's a slightly richer sound with the OR, but not a massive difference with all three waves coming through together. So I'll then patch this up into something else and create a bit of a musical patch. I've got a sequencer moving which is affecting the decay length on an envelope which has been triggered by my main clock, and this is opening up a filter, and the mixer waves from the logic gate is the input to that filter. Hopefully this video has been useful to show off the RYO logic module range and also give some general logic tips and ideas of how to get stuck in. Check out the other RYO module overviews on my page, hit like and subscribe for more videos every week, and finally check out the Patreon link in the video description to see how you can support me making these videos.